This week's parsha is Parshat Tzav, is the second parsha in Chumash V'Yikra. A substantial portion of Chumash V'Yikra is devoted to the avoda, to bringing Korbanot, and so that's what we're going to be focusing on today. That is, what is the idea behind the mitzvah of Korbanot? This is based on a shiur I heard from Rav Bernstein in 2015, and it's Machloket Rishonim, a very massive one between Rambam, right, Maimonides, and the Ramban, Nachmanides. So they have contrasting positions. Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim has the following to say. Says, look, the idea behind, and we will be oversimplifying, but here's Rambam's opinion. So he says, the whole idea of Korbanot was actually a concession to the Jewish people at the time, because at the time of Matan Torah, the Jewish people had observed other religions. They saw how Korbanot, animal sacrifices, played such a large role in their religious activities, and as a result, it was just too hard for the Jewish people to connect to God on such an abstract level. They needed something more tangible, and as a result, God gave them the mitzvah of Korbanot. And even though this was a concession, there were severe limitations to kind of to kasher this idea, to clean it up. And so some of those restrictions, for example, are where you could offer Korbanot only in the temple, right? The temple came much later, but in the Mishkan there are specific geographic restrictions on where these Korbanot can be brought. Who could bring them was obviously restricted, only the Kohanim. And those are kind of more general ones. More specifically, there are only certain animals could be brought as Korbanot. For example, it was only cows, sheep, and goats, and that's it. And the reason why, says Rambam, is because all of these animals were actually worshipped as gods by other cultures. The sheep were obviously worshipped by the Egyptians. That's behind the Korban Pesach, right? We slaughter a sheep and roast it, effectively barbecue it out in public so that the Egyptians would see us murdering their god. And that was also meant to kind of disabuse the Jewish people, thinking like, if you think these are gods, well, they're not. You're killing them and eating them. So that's one. Goats were, I think, worshipped by a local Canaanite nation, so we killed goats too. And of course, cows. Rambam talks about how the Indians still worship cows, and of course, this is still true today. And so we kill cows too. That is to say, there are some cultures who think that these animals are deities, so you're going to kill and sacrifice them for the true deity. So that's some of the restrictions. There are, of course, others. For example, last week's parsha spoke about how the korbanot were supposed to be dipped in salt. They're supposed to be like salted, and we only eat korbanot. So we're not allowed to use honey with korbanot. You're also not supposed to eat chametz with korbanot. The temple was actually, really interestingly, kasher lePesach almost the entire year. There are very few korbanot that you could bring chametz with. There are actually two. There's the shtei halechem, right, for Shavuot, where you bring two chametz loaves, and then another time was when you brought a korban toda, and that's pretty much it. And actually, this is an important point. Try to remember this for Pesach, because we'll be speaking about that. But the point is, there's almost never chametz in the Beis Hamikdash, and the reason for these restrictions, for the salt, for lack of chametz, and like yeast, for the lack of honey, is because the way other cultures would do it is they want to sweeten the korban, they want to make it taste really nice. But God was like, that's not what we're after here. So those are some of the restrictions. Now, and Rambam, by the way, just because he goes into quite a lot of detail, but he says, he's like, look, anyone who tries to understand every single detail about Korbanot and how it relates to other pagan cultures is going to go completely crazy. They don't, not every detail aligns, but those are just some details that he provides. Ramban takes huge issue with this, because there's room to say, in the Rambam's opinion, that really there's no intrinsic value to Korbanot. It was just done as a concession, but there's nothing particularly positive about Korbanot in and of themselves. And Ramban marshals many sources to show that can't possibly be true. Just as quick examples, for example, the Korbanot are often called reach nichoach, right? It should be a pleasing aroma. Why would it be pleasing if it's just done as a concession to the Yetzer Hara of the Jewish people? And then two, of course, Noach's sacrifice was called the Reach Nichoach, and the fact that he even sacrificed and that God accepted it was, I guess, a chiddush, because what culture was there that would lead Noach astray? There's no avodah zarah that he would have learned from. And this is doubly true with Cain and Hevel. They both brought Korbanot, and in fact, God turned to Hevel's Korban and accepted it. And there was no culture. They were literally the second generation on earth. They were the first human-born people. And so there's no room to say here that this is like just a concession to people's Yetzer Hara of seeing how other people worship religion. There were no other religions, and therefore we see here some proofs that there is intrinsic value to Korbanot. And the general position of the Ramban, and borrowing some of Rav Bernstein's words, is that Korbanot have the effect of aligning and of connecting all the higher realms and bringing them together, so that ultimately the Shekhinah itself is brought into the world and divine influence flows into the world. We do not think the Ramban says this, but Korban comes from the word karov, and in that way it helps bring the divine presence closer. In fact, the Netziv points out that Korbanot are often called lechem, and the reason why that is because, very loosely speaking, our relationship, as in people's relationship between the body and the soul, right? In order to keep the soul in the body, we have to eat. If you don't eat, the soul is going to leave. So too, God is the soul, the world is the body, and we bring the Korbanot in order to keep the soul connected to that body. So those are just, again, the two big positions among the Rishonim. Rambam seems to say there's no intrinsic value. It was just done as a concession to the Jewish people. Ramban says there's plenty of positive connections, and we see this from the Psukim earlier, from the earlier generations. We also see it from the severity of the punishments of effectively messing up the Korbanot, which could give you karet. That is actually the punishment you get for eating on Yom Kippur. And for eating chametz on Pesach, that's serious business. If it was just done as a concession to the Jewish people, why would the punishment be so severe? So again, Ramban says that the Korbanot help the divine presence flow into the world, and we'll leave it there. Those are the two positions. Shabbat Shalom.